everyone, I'm Anya. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing sort of a combined Authortube and Booktube newbie tag. I thought it was high time that I did this, and I decided to sort of combine the two of them because I guess my interests and the focus of this channel is going to be in both areas, and also I like the questions from both, so I sort of wanted to address some from each. Yeah, let's get started. So the first question is, why did you start this channel? And I'm going to be sort of rolling that into why I decided to continue it, because I sort of took a month or two off in the middle there, and I talked a little bit about this in my previous wrap-up video, but I'll get into it a little bit more now. So I guess I started this channel sort of on a whim. I had just graduated from college, and in college I did a lot of like writing workshops. I was an English major, I had a lot of friends who were writers, and I really loved that community, and I didn't want to give it up. I played around with the idea of starting a blog, but it just seemed more fun, more interesting to learn how to make videos and start a YouTube channel, so that's what I did. But I ran into, I guess, a midlife crisis almost immediately with the resurgence of Black Lives Matter protests in response to the killings of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, of Ahmaud Arbery, of so many other Black Americans. And it basically seemed to me not relevant and not appropriate to be making these like lightly sarcastic videos where it's just me talking about writing and reading fantasy. So I was at the point of giving up on this channel, but then I asked myself, you know, is there something I can do to support this cause, use the channel to support the Black Lives Matter movement? And I've been reading and listening and donating money and writing emails and doing all of those things. And side note, I encourage you to do that too. I'll put resources down in the description. So I was doing all of these things, but I still wanted to do something that was a little more specific to my interests and my skills. And I hit on this concept that a lot of people have been talking about lately, about the importance of amplifying Black voices in this time, and especially in the publishing industry, which is so undiverse and so hostile towards Black people and people of color in general. And you know, you can sort of see that in that thing on Twitter with Publishing Paid Me, where it just shows the crazy amounts that white authors, debut authors even, are being paid in advances for their books, while some of the best known Black authors, people like N.K. Jemisin and Jesmyn Ward, are not being paid nearly those same sums. And so there's obviously a lot of work to be done in publishing and in the book community. And so I decided to refocus this channel on in this moment, amplifying Black voices in particular, and that's going to be more the focus for a little while, but eventually branching out to all marginalized people, because I think YouTube is a great way to sort of amplify the voices of marginalized authors, you know, when I'm doing more Booktube focused content, and then when I'm doing more Authortube focused content, thinking about diversity within writing and within the writing and publishing community as well. So that was why I decided to continue with this channel, even after having that like midlife crisis and really questioning whether making Booktube videos and Authortube videos was the best way that I could be spending my time. So the second question is, what can you bring to Authortube/Booktube? I think overall my channel is going to be mainly a mix of Authortube content, but with a focus on reading and concrete examples from books that I guess pushes it a little more towards the Booktube side. And I'll talk a little more about this later. The second main point of my channel is, as I said before, talking about issues of representation and diversity, and that's going to be especially in the genres that I read and write in, which is a lot of fantasy, a lot of YA. So personally, looking back on my own reading habits, my reading has not been nearly as diverse as it could be, and that's a failure on my part. And it's something that I'm committing to fix, and I want this channel to be a place where others who are either becoming aware of this issue or have been aware of this to come together and think about these issues, talk about them, and especially me as a non-Black author and a non-Black creator, I cannot nor should I speak for those whose identities I don't share. And I should not be a substitute for those people's voices and stories. But what I can do is commit to making a space, making a channel where I'm very explicitly conscious of these issues and the ongoing problems that we see in publishing and in the sort of book community. I don't have all the answers, but I'm figuring it out. I'm trying my best to figure it out, and especially how to handle these issues in my own writing. And if that's something that you're interested in or something that you want to talk about, I'd love to learn with you because, you know, as a non-Black creator, I have the privilege of not having to deal with some of these things in my own everyday life. And if there are other non-Black folks out there who want to learn more about this without putting the onus on the Black community, that's sort of what this is for. I'm still sort of figuring out what I want this to look like in a more concrete sense, but at least at first, from the outset, I want to commit to making at least 2/3 of my videos that are either highlighting diverse books or talking about issues of diversity and representation in writing. So anyway, to go back to that idea from before of this like combination between Booktube and Authortube, I was inspired by this idea of reading like a writer, which I think is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but there isn't a whole lot out there about what that actually means, what that looks like in practice. And so that's sort of what I'm going to be doing, is reading both books and other types of media like a writer, and sort of focusing on what can I learn as a writer from these different types of media. And I'm also thinking about doing more sort of classic Authortube content about like the craft of writing, stuff like that, but also all with like real world examples or examples from actual books. You know, bottom line is I love reading just as much as I love writing, and funnily enough, they're intrinsically connected, so I just want to be able to talk about both. So the next question is, why do you love reading and writing? Maybe this is a cliched answer, but what I really love is being able to enter into other worlds. And I don't mean that just in terms of like description or world building or characters, but in terms of seeing this little slice of the author's imagination that they've decided to share with you. And my favorite authors tend to be the ones who can communicate this feeling really, really strongly through their writing itself. So some of my favorite books are things like Nine Fox Gambit, The Scorpio Races, Howl's Moving Castle, The Fifth Season. For a lot of those, I really have no idea what happens in the plot half the time. Well, that's an exaggeration, but the plot is less important than the feeling of the world that you get from reading those books. For each of those, I have a very distinct sense of what that is, and I think the authors do a great job of maintaining it throughout the book. And funnily enough, that's basically the same reason that I love writing. I love being able to create that and figuring out ways to use language to make that same feeling within my writing. You know, I get to immerse myself in the feeling of this other world, but instead of being told what it is by another author, I get to make the rules, and I get to use the tools of language and of writing to figure out how to do that. Okay, next question. What authors have inspired your writing the most? So definitely my favorite, all-time favorite YA book, and the book that inspired me to spend my life writing novels, was The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. And I really want to make a video about this because it was truly so influential for me. But the gist of it is that A, it captures that feeling that I was just talking about really well, and B, you can just really tell that Maggie Stiefvater cares so much about the things that she's writing about, and she makes you care about them too. Like, the example I always use is that she cares a lot about cars. I could not care less about cars and about horses, but after reading that book, I found that I really did. I wanted to care about those things. I wanted to know more about them, and the way that she does that in The Scorpio Races, I think, is just really special and was something that inspired me to want to do that for other people. Okay, so what do you usually read or write? My go-to answer for both reading and writing is fantasy and YA. I'm definitely trying to push myself out of my comfort zone in both reading and writing. Especially now that I'm out of school, I want to make a conscious effort to be reading more literary fiction, and also to be thinking critically in the way that you do in English classes, in literature classes, about books, because that's a skill that I really don't want to lose. I love those books that challenge you both like in terms of themes and in terms of language, and I love sort of the problem-solving aspect of figuring out what the author is trying to do with those things and how they impact the book as a whole. Okay, what's something you'll never write? Just watch. Whatever answer I give here is going to be the thing that I ultimately end up getting published for. I mean, I guess if I had to answer this, it would probably be horror, because I'm a complete wimp and I don't read horror at all, and therefore I don't think I would ever write it. But actually, now that I think of it, I did one time write a very short horror story. So I guess I already lied. That's already not true, but horror in general. What's your book's pitch? If you have multiple works, choose your favorite. My current project, I prepared this, I wrote this down. A girl wants to become a master painter, but with imperial forces threatening war, it may be impossible to protect both her city, her friends, and her passion for painting. So it's basically this YA fantasy that was inspired by this class I took about painting in the Dutch Golden Age and sort of the really strong and interesting connections between painting and politics that they had during the 17th century there. And I guess the caveat is that there's just a lot more magic, a lot more people of color, a lot more like casual queerness, all of those things that I want to have in a book, while also capturing this really fascinating connection between painting, art, and politics. So the next question is, if you were a book, how would you pitch yourself? And I'm going to change this to, if you were a book, how would you blurb yourself? Because I really don't know how I would pitch myself. I have no idea what's going on in my life. But if I were a book, I would blurb myself thus. A slow, unassuming novel lifted by moments of sarcasm. The prose can be opaque and even stuffy, but shining through it is an appreciation for the quiet beauty of life. Foggy beaches, cliffs, raspberry tea in a white porcelain cup. And also carbs, definitely carbs. Next question, what's your publishing path? So for a long time, I was really set on traditional publishing because I wanted to see my books in like Barnes and Nobles and see people reading them on the train and all of those things. And it seemed that traditional publishing was the way to go to get that done. But I have been thinking about that a lot lately because really, it's not that I want my book to be in Barnes and Nobles, it's that I want it to mean as much as possible to the most people possible. And I guess I'm rethinking now whether and how self-publishing might be able to get me to that same place. And so I guess I've seen a lot of stuff about self-publishing here on YouTube, and so it's something that I'm really excited to learn more about and see, whether I want to switch routes or maybe do sort of a combination of those two things. Especially because the publishing industry right now is in quite an upheaval. People are really questioning things, I think, and it's a moment of reckoning, and I think things in publishing will be changing at an unprecedented rate going forward, and so I really want to see how that plays out and how it might change my plans. But for now, I am in the process of querying my previous book, and so that's sort of where I am in the process. Okay, what's your biggest writing struggle? That's easy, definitely plotting. Once I kind of know what's going to happen, it's easy to write it down, to translate it into words, and that's the part about writing that I really love, is playing around with words themselves and developing characters and exploring the world. But figuring out the plot and outlining it is just such a pain, and I know I have to do it because if I don't, I tend to get stalled out, but it's really not an enjoyable process for me. And what's your biggest writing skill? I think this is kind of specific, but I think it's changing the voice and the tone of my writing to suit the specific characters and setting that I want to evoke. I love sort of figuring out how you can use the same words in different combinations in different ways to evoke different feelings as an author. And I've never really felt that I have one particular narrative voice as an author, but rather one that's attached to each character whose perspective I'm writing from. And I think that is something that I really enjoy doing, and I think is a strength of my writing. Okay, what challenges do you think starting a Booktube/Authortube channel will be the hardest to overcome? I'll be upfront here. I'm horrible with social media. I am really terrible at staying on top of trends and like drama, and that's one of the things that I'm most worried about with starting this channel, especially given that I want to focus on these issues of diversity and representation that change so much from day to day and week to week. I think it's going to be a challenge to stay on top of all of that and be able to respond appropriately and in a timely way to all of the things that might be going on in the community. It's all very well if I can talk about diversity and representation in writing, but if I'm not able to address the very real and very present things that are affecting people on a day-to-day basis within this community, then it basically, defeats the purpose of what I would hope to accomplish with this channel, and it just goes back to that concept of content being out of touch with reality that I really want to avoid. So I guess that ties into the next question, which is, what is your biggest Booktube/Authortube question? And that's, how does everyone stay on top of what's happening in the community, even while holding down a job or going to school or taking care of like whatever other things they're doing in their life? Please tell me if you have answers to this. I need help. And then finally, what are you most excited for about this new channel? definitely my answer to this. It's another cliched one, but it's really just meeting people who are also really excited about books and about writing and talking about those things. As I mentioned before, one of my favorite things about college was having these groups of people who loved writing, who loved reading, you know, book clubs and writing clubs and classes and all of that. Basically people who I could just like unapologetically be this like bookish nerd around. And I'm just really excited to meet you all and talk to you all, especially people who are interested in thinking about the same questions that I am about what it means to have true equity and representation in writing and publishing and the Booktube community. So short answer, I'd love to get to know you, chat in the comments. So that's it for my Authortube, Booktube, like Frankenstein's creature newbie tag. As I said, I'd love to hear from you all, especially other folks who are new to Authortube. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and check out my other videos and subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.